Welcome to Legal Wellbeing in Action, the podcast series of the New Mexico Wellbeing Committee. We are reaching our mid-year episode, and we couldn't be more pleased to have so many of you tuning in. There's much more to come as we continue our focus on our What Our Healthy Legal Community Looks Like campaign. The campaign itself aims to understand the state of well-being in legal organizations, enlist leaders to help define what well-being looks like for their populace, identify priorities for the community, measure, evaluate, and improve. This episode will feature the Young Lawyers Division. Our speakers today will be introducing themselves and speaking to the challenges that they have personally faced when it comes to what many new attorneys hear in their first year of practice. Well, this is just how it's always been done. So this episode will be looking to address the ways in which our speakers think attorneys and firms can work towards a healthier legal community and how transformation can come from the next generation of young attorneys going forward. From here, I will let our guests take it away. To our listeners out there, thank you for tuning into Legal Wellbeing in Action. If you'd like to leave us feedback or continue the conversation on well-being, please email us at well@sbnm.org. We hope you enjoy.
Thank you, Tanessa, for that introduction, and thank you for having us on Legal Wellbeing in Action. Today's episode is about what a healthy legal community looks like for the State Bar Young Lawyers Division and for new attorneys. Specifically today, we're going to focus on something that we have all heard a lot in our first years of practice. We've all heard a lot that, well, this is just always how it's been done. And as we work towards a healthier legal community, a lot of that transformation comes from the next generation of attorneys. So I'm excited today to have a conversation with three fantastic attorneys I know, Billy, Shelly, and Brianna, who are all in their first decade of practice, about what it is like to be a new lawyer and what pressures there are, and how young lawyers in New Mexico are challenging norms towards a healthier legal community. We'll start today with a round of introductions of our panelists. My name is Lindsay Cutler, and I will be moderating our podcast today. I am an attorney with the New Mexico Center on Law and Poverty, where I've been since 2017. And I do a variety of policy work on lending and debt collection, including the passage of a 36% rate cap in 2022. My practice includes administrative advocacy, direct representation, and impact litigation relating to housing as well. So as I mentioned, I'm joined today by three fantastic attorneys, Shellie Patcheck, Breanna Contreras, and Billy Jimenez. Starting with Shelly and then Billy and Brianna, please go ahead and introduce yourselves and give us a little bit of information about where you work, your type of practice, how many years you've been in practice, and an overview of your trajectory so far.
Thanks, Lindsay. My name is Shellie Patcheck. I have been an attorney for just over 10 years. I graduated from the UNM School of Law in December of 2011. And then moved back to Farmington. That's where I'm from. And I initially went to work at the district attorney's office. I worked there from 2012 until 2015. After I had my first child, I then went into private practice. I worked at the Titus and Murphy law firm from 2015 until 2021. And then in last year, just over a year ago, I opened up my own practice, Patcheck Law PC, here in Farmington. I do mostly criminal defense work, some personal injury, some workers' comp, and a little bit of a mishmash of other things. And so that's a quick overview of me.
Thanks so much. Billy?
Yeah, thanks. Billy Jimenez, and I also graduated in Shelly's class, but graduated in the spring semester. So I've been an attorney since sworn in, September 2012. So we're right in our 9th year of practice, and it's going strong. I've had the opportunity to work at a couple of different firms and transactional litigation settings, civil defense, construction litigation, all kinds of different avenues. Basically kind of jumped around, couldn't really find like where I wanted to be, and had a lot of opportunities. But then I ultimately ended up coming to the Department of Health in 2019. And I was doing that with the purpose of hopefully become like a school teacher. I sort of wanted to take a break from litigation and do something completely different. Took this state job as general counsel of the New Mexico Department of Health. thinking that it would be somewhat of a break from the grind, and it ended up being probably the hardest job I think anybody could ever have. So since then, I've been the general counsel, deputy secretary, acting secretary, and then certified medical assistant with the New Mexico Department of Health since then. So been here since and through the pandemic, and as we exit out the pandemic. So it's been a pretty adventurous ride, and I think I have a pretty good gauge as to work-life balance and what that takes and stresses of the job, both from the far end of the spectrum to the other end. So appreciate being here and happy to discuss more about how we can provide some insight.
Well, that takes it to me. And Lindsay, I first want to say thank you so much for taking the time to organize this conversation. I really appreciate being included and being able to contribute to it. My name is Breanna Contreras. I graduated law school in 2013 from Notre Dame Law School. I was born and raised in Albuquerque and returned to New Mexico after law school. I got my undergraduate degree from UNM at the Anderson School of Business. And I've been in practice for almost 9 years. Prior to law school, I worked in a few different law firm settings to get my feet wet and to see if law school was right for me, including at a nonprofit organization and a few law firms where I worked in various capacities, including as a bilingual legal assistant, a runner back in the time before you could file pleadings online, as a receptionist, and as a law clerk. I recently, at the beginning of this year, moved in-house as Vice President of Legal for Meow. For those of you who are unfamiliar, Meow is a Santa Fe, New Mexico-based arts and entertainment company, and is a public benefit corporation and certified B Corporation. I work with a small team here at Meow to manage the company's intellectual property, negotiate contracts, and advise the company on a variety of IP-related deals. And prior to working at Meow, I was a partner at Bardicky Allison law firm in Santa Fe, where I practiced for 6 years in the arenas of intellectual property law and complex commercial and employment litigation. And I was really blessed at Bardicky Allison to have had amazing mentors there who taught me so much and have been such a huge part of my growth and development as a lawyer. Ben Allison, Paul Bardicky, and Justin Miller over there. And that's kind of what led me to this great opportunity to come in-house for Meow. So I feel really blessed and excited to contribute to this conversation.
Thank you. As you all have described, I think each of you has had a really diverse career experiences and diverse from one another as well. So the practice of law has really looked different for each of us. Can you talk a little bit more about how you selected your type of practice and what you were told about what that practice was going to look like? Have you ever been told? I know I've had experiences like this where we've been told that's actually not how it's done, or you can't bring a case that way, or that's just not how we do things here. How did you address a situation like that, and how would you have done it differently if you could look back? And Billy, you want to take this one first?
Sure. So, I think it's a lot about when you're coming up as a young attorney, falling into, particular setting at a law firm or a job and figuring out, what are the boundaries that you need to adhere to. And the way I think about it is there's sort of people who are form and some people who are substance. And that's a good tip to know when you're going into different workplace settings. Some people focus more on one other than the other. And so it's important to know what that flavor looks like and then try to adjust your expectations with that. I came into the profession not really knowing a lot about it at all and not really having a sound direction about where I wanted to go or where I wanted to be. But that's not necessarily an issue. But what can be an issue is if you don't understand that, like, some people have a certain way of doing their work and you're trying to, as Brianna had mentioned, become like a mentee to somebody, to learn from somebody. And I'm sure Shelly had the same experience at the DA's office and through Titus, learning how to, learning from somebody else, learning what their style is, and then eventually taking that time to develop your own voice and your own set of skills and creativity to take it to the next level. And I think that's probably not as clear to young attorneys, that there is sort of like this process that you have to go through. And sometimes you can get stuck in this mentality that you want to just go at it and bring new skills and new ideas and writing styles to something where there are practiced methods that inform us how to get things done in a proper way and in a more efficient way. And so it's worth it during the early years to take the time to learn from others and really understand why things are happening a certain way. On the flip side, sometimes after all this, now I'm a client, right, to a lot of different law firms and outside counsel that we have. Then you also see like how some things are superfluous in processes and procedures, and but it's nice. I think over time you do develop your own voice and way of doing things, and way you litigate cases, or way you defend cases, way you deal with client control issues. It's nice that you can develop that over time.
Thanks, Billy. No, I think that's a great answer. I really appreciate it. Brianna, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I would. And I have to say, Billy has some good pointers there about learning from the good in what has been done before. I think that's a huge key to not rejecting everything, right? Taking the positive of the way things have been done and improving on it rather than, staying stagnant, but also recognizing the value and the intelligence and work ethic that other people have employed before you, and really making those people your mentors. So for me personally, when I was a 1L at Notre Dame, one of my professors connected me with a lawyer practicing in New Mexico, because I knew I wanted to come back to New Mexico to practice rather than go to Chicago or New York or a bigger market. And so he put me in touch with Ben Allison, who at the time was at a different firm. And that's how I ended up doing kind of a different type of law, if you will, which is intellectual property, a less common area of law, at least for New Mexico practitioners. And I don't really think I chose IP law as much as I was just in a position where I had a great mentor who was really helping me develop that skill set. And what I found in my career is that while the type of work is really important, it's at least as important to find good people to work with and to find good mentors, because you could be doing the most interesting work in the world, but if someone's not there to help you develop well as a lawyer, someone who's able to invest in you individually and who's willing to allow you to make mistakes and improve yourself, then it's difficult to really find your own way, if you will, or it's a lot more difficult, I would say. And so what I found helpful for me personally is to find a unique niche, maybe that not a lot of people have a skill set in, and really developing in that arena and being open to opportunities as they present themselves. And for me, that's been coming in-house for Meow. And on the point of that you raised earlier, Lindsay, about, you're doing it wrong, or you'll never be successful if you do this, or, I definitely can relate to that, because I was told early on in my practice, I actually got pregnant with my first son. I was told by an attorney, you're not going to want to go out of town to take depositions now that you're a mom, because you'll want to be home with your baby, and those sorts of kind of more narcissistic things. And I think, when you hear that as a woman and you're already trying to make it work, it probably makes you work that much harder to try to prove yourself. And while that's good in some ways, it's also sad in other ways. So when you talk about this is the way it's always been done, or you're doing it wrong, I think what I'd like to see in terms of how the profession moves forward is being supportive of young attorneys who have families, both the men and the women in that arena, and really creating opportunities for young attorneys, whether they choose to have families or not. I think it's really important.
No, I think that's really important too, Brianna. Thank you. Shelly, do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, definitely. A couple of things that Brianna and Billy both brought up. I think Billy called it developing your own voice, and Brianna said something about finding your own way. And I think that that's really important. I always knew that I wanted to do criminal law. I had worked at the DA's office before I went to law school with the idea that I would come back. And that's what I did. And I think a lot of criminal attorneys, and especially criminal defense attorneys, feel the need to be super aggressive, pit bull, tough, mean lawyers. And I think that DAs often feel the need to be tough and show that they're strong and they can, you know, stand up to that. But I think it comes out as being overly aggressive and mean, uncivil a lot of times, personal attacks, things like that. And I think, and when I thought about the question of that's how it's always been done, that's what popped into my head is a lot of the older attorneys that I knew when I first started, just the incivility and the aggression and just being mean when you're trying to be tough or trying to be strong on your position. And I think that what I've learned over the years, and it's taken me a lot of years to figure this out, is you don't have to be a jerk to be a good attorney. You don't have to be a jerk to do your job well and to take care of your clients' needs in the way that they want you to. And I think it took me a long time to realize that. Bill Sleece wrote an article in the Bar Bulletin probably 2 years ago, talking about the connection between incivility and well-being. And I when I read it, I cut it out and I hung it up on the wall. And I've since lost it, but he talked a lot about how being in that confrontational environment all the time is detrimental to our well-being. And he talked about his blood pressure being raised as a result of that sort of thing. And that's what I think a lot about. And that's what I tell young attorneys is you don't have to be a jerk to be a good attorney. And just because that's how it's always been done, maybe where I'm at, or maybe in the criminal field, it's not how it has to be going forward. And so over the years, I think that I've been able to find my way and find my own voice and figure out that I don't have to take on that role. And we can be civil with one another, and we can stand up for our clients, but we can do it in a way that is supportive of other people in the legal profession. And so I think that's what I think about when I think about the topic of that's how it's always been done. I think we can always improve the legal profession and by being more civil to one another.
Thanks, Shelly. I agree with that. I definitely do. Something else that I think comes up is challenging. I think you all have touched on this in different ways. As young lawyers working to prove themselves, working to prove ourselves and establish a reputation, establish a style, a way of doing things. It can be really hard to strike a work-life balance. And so I think of it as work-life balance and work-life imbalance. I'd love to hear a bit more about how this has looked like for you as young attorneys. I've heard a little bit about choosing careers or maybe job paths that are aligning with your values. And that's one way that balance comes in for some folks. For others, work-life balance is really about family and about juggling family and putting family first. I think Shelly and Brianna, you touched on this, but how your career path maybe evolved after starting a family. I'd also be interested in hearing from folks about, boundaries around time off. We're headed into a long weekend right now. What does that look like for young lawyers in this community? So, Brianna, if you don't mind taking this one first, I'd love to hear from you on this.
Yeah, actually, Lindsay, what you said, and also what Shelly said about Bill Sleece's article and work-life balance, it reminds me of a funny story that my former colleague, Justin Miller, told me when he was getting checked out for a life insurance application, and the woman was taking his blood pressure, and she was just trying to strike up a conversation with him and said, "Hey, so what is it that you do?" And he said, "Oh, I'm a lawyer," and you could see his blood pressure shoot up. And that was funny to me because I feel that same way, getting a nasty email from opposing counsel. It just sets you in the worst mood and can keep you up at night and have you really stressed and anxious. And I think for me, that was tough when I was in litigation. It's just spending so much energy and time feeling like I had to adhere to certain standards, like be nice, as Shelly mentioned, be professional, while at the same time experiencing and opposing counsel who didn't adhere to those same standards. And it wears on you, and it's really difficult. And, you know, I ended up making the decision to move in-house. I think it's been a good transition for me. A lot of that sort of worst side of litigation is now handled through external litigation counsel. And so I can really focus on the things that add value to my client outside of litigation, including, you know, how do we protect and enhance the brand, and how do we build it up, and how do we develop good agreements that protect the company and that make people feel good about doing business with us. So that's been one major way for me to kind of impact that work-life balance and imbalance. It's become a bit more balanced. I will say I'm not super great at this work-life balance, you know, issue. I don't ever feel like I've been like really wonderful about figuring out how to make it all work. You know, there's always something that slips. My husband and I, we have 3 kids. They're pretty young. We have a 7-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old. And so right now we're in the thick of it with them bringing home all kinds of germs from daycare and having to quarantine at home every time someone tests positive in one of their classes and things of that nature. It's gotten better more recently, thank goodness. But for a while, it was really challenging to juggle private practice and 3 kids with 3 different sources of potential infections. I feel really grateful, actually. Over the past several years of practice, I've worked with people who really understand and value family and place a strong emphasis on making sure that the family's needs are met. So it's been very much a policy of course, we're going to work hard. We're going to work really hard. We're going to represent our clients' interests well. But if you need to take the work home, or if you need to work home or make up for the work in the evening or on the weekend so that you can have time off for kids' doctor's appointments or school performances, there was always an emphasis first on taking care of your family and taking care of yourself. I had high-risk pregnancies with my kiddos, and so that meant traveling from Santa Fe down to Albuquerque to see an OBGYN with more frequency than is standard in a regular pregnancy, which already has tons and tons of appointments. And the firm I was with at the time, Barty Callison, was always very understanding and very accommodating of that. I think another thing that's made a huge difference is kind of the support systems that I've surrounded myself with. So I have a super supportive husband who has never demanded that I put his career before my own. He's been really supportive and has always told me, we're going to figure this out together. And sometimes he pulls more weight at home and sometimes I do. And I can't say that we never have fights about how much weight each of us is pulling, or that we have the balance right all the time. And I'm certain it causes some stress and tension, but I think at the end of the day, we really try to focus on supporting each other in each of our careers, which is really wonderful. And then just in terms of work-life balance, the other thing that I'll say is the last law firm I was at and my current organization offer really good benefits in terms of maternity leave. And that has been really key to allowing it to be more sustainable. Like if I had to go back to work, a couple of weeks or 4 weeks after I had given birth, or if I had to take unpaid leave, it would have been really difficult on our family to kind of manage that. So I was fortunate enough myself to be able to have 12 weeks of paid time off with my 2 most recent pregnancies. And that was, incredible. And when other women reach out to me in the legal community that come from different firms or different companies, they ask me, how have I negotiated maternity leave? And I always tell them, and I feel straightforward. I feel like it's important to be forthcoming about that and to support one another. And I actually know of at least 3 women that have personally benefited because their firms didn't offer a particular level of maternity leave. And when they came to me, I was able to share, this is my experience and this is the experience I know is given at this firm and this firm, so that they could utilize that as a negotiation point and advocate for themselves for better leave. And I really honestly think it pays back 10 times in people's commitment to the company and to the organization to treat them well, because they'll treat you well too. at least that's been my experience, and I feel really grateful for that. I know it's not the standard, but it's definitely has made what can be a very stressful profession at least more, more, if you will, more easy to stick with. I know that's kind of a long answer, but
no, thank you, Brianna. And yeah, I agree. And I really appreciate that too. And that when you're advocating for yourself in a space like that, it's not only like other female attorneys, maybe, or attorneys of any gender arguing for or advocating for paid family leave. It's the other staff in our firms and our organizations that we have to think of too. So I think that's really important. I also appreciated that work-life balance is not something you get to a point, I think, and you've just achieved, but by nature of being a balance, it's a little imperfect. So I appreciate that too, Brianna. Shelly, do you want to talk a little bit more about your experiences in this space?
Absolutely. I'll tell you, when I was first asked to do this podcast, I was hesitant to do it. I was told we're going to talk a little bit about work-life imbalance, and I was like, I don't have any work-life balance. I don't think that I am the right person for this job. But I talked about it a lot, and I thought about it a lot. And I think what Brianna said is right. Sometimes it's balance, sometimes it's imbalance. Sometimes, you give 100% in one area and you can't give 100% in another area. And so for me, I think finding some sort of balance is letting go of the idea that everything has to be perfect, letting go of the idea of that I can do, I can train for a half marathon and raise 2 kids and, do every case perfectly and all of the other things that I want to do and, to live, what we perceive as the perfect life. And so some weeks, you work a little bit later and you don't spend the time with your kids. And then the next week, I think you maybe slack off a little bit at work and you spend that time. I think making, there's some imbalance that comes along with life. But once we let go of the notion that we can do it all or be perfect, I think that's where it gets a little bit easier. And so in talking with newer attorneys, that's what I would say is you got to let go of the notion that you can do it all or that you can do it all perfectly, because I think that's impossible. And I think the notion of work-life balance is probably impossible as well. But I think we all do the best that we can. Brianna mentioned surrounding yourself with people who share your values. And I think that's really important as well to finding that peace and that balance that you can live with. When I had my first baby when I was at the DA's office in 2015. And I came back to the DA's office and it was not a good environment for me because something changes, I guess, after you have a baby. And there's a lot of things that you just don't want to do anymore. And so for me, it wasn't a good environment for me anymore. And I, even though that's what I wanted to do my whole life, I decided to leave that and find something that fit better with what I perceived for my future and for my family. And I sort of had to carve that out and create it on my own. And I think we shouldn't be afraid to do that, to make our lives what we want, make them make our careers align with our values, so that we can have the balance and the life that we want going forward. So I think it's tough, and I don't think anybody's ever achieved work-life balance. If they have, that's wonderful, but they might not be an attorney. And so I would say I think Brianna's right. We have to surround ourselves with people who share our values, and we have to carve out what we want what our own life to be like, and let go of the notion that we can do it all perfect.
Thanks, Shelly. Yeah, I think that's so important. We truly can never do it all. And as I always think about, we're like growing up in our careers. And as we do that, that changes, and we just have to remain flexible. Billy, I'd love for your take on this question too.
Well, like Shelly, I thought I was brought here to be like the black sheep of this particular topic and basically express how I've done a horrible job at this, which is probably true. So I have not been good at work-life balance, and it's tough because I didn't expect to get into or arrive where I'm currently at. And so I estimate that over the last 2.5 years that I've received well over 1 million emails, texts, and phone calls, right? So, I mean, it's been nonstop, 7 days a week, all every single day for 2.5 years. And, I think there were some good things that came out of that. I think I learned a lot about myself. I think I was able to contribute to my community that I found to be self-fulfilling. But yeah, there's definitely sacrifices that come away with that. And at the end of the day, it's hard for me to recall like what's happened over the last 2.5 years. It's sort of like a memory blur. But I think that it's really important to what I have learned is a couple of different things. One is boundaries, and two is the ability to take time out for yourself and just to take a deep breath. And I think we always overlook that, especially with families and work and trying to do things like that. But what's really important is the boundaries, making sure that you do try to let people know that when you're not responding to calls, you're not responding to calls. Sometimes it's, what our current secretary, Dr. Scray, says is, if it's important, he'll call you. If it's a text, don't text him back right away. If it's an email, it can wait till Monday. So you can set up rules with people you work with as to when it's urgent versus not urgent. Sometimes it's about not responding to that text message right away because sometimes you set yourself up for this expectation that you're going to be the Brianna or the Shelly or the Lindsay that responds right away. So they're gonna text you for every little thing that happens. So making sure you set up proper boundaries for when you're available, when you're not available, what you'll do, what you won't do, I think is sometimes overlooked. And Brianna remembers this from a certain boss that we once had that they used to say, never say no to any project or any assignment. And I do think there's some truth to that, but there's also some truth into like setting some work boundaries for yourself and what you have availability and being able to tell people when you don't have certain availability for things. So there's that. And then just the hobbies, one thing that I've gotten super into has been just like taking walks, which seems kind of like sad and elderly, but like what I think is like super nice is just going for a walk like at lunchtime and fielding phone calls, or I can check emails and respond to things just as I'm walking down a path around the park, and it's kind of quaint. And I'll go on very long walks during the weekend. I've gotten up to I think 16 or 17 miles where I'll just walk all the way up the Bosque Trail in Albuquerque and all the way back. But just, it's steady. I can still check emails. I can talk to people on the phone. And for some reason it brings a lot of peace. I don't know. And then traveling too, like actually taking time for vacations where you can get out of, and I would taking a staycation can be cool, but strongly suggest just going somewhere. You can get out of town, out of the state, that's even better. And just go, and it has to be, what I've learned, it has to be for at least a week. Like it has to be, and you have to do that at least once a year. You have to, because you have to be able to sort of reset and reconfigure. And I found that if you kind of shortchange it, you get back to work, after 3 days of vacation or something like that, and you kind of are still in the same mindset. And so you need to and it's probably different for everybody, but you have to give yourself enough time to reset. And if that means being with your family, going someplace different, just like not having to think about the day-to-day things that are on your mind is really, really helpful to your mental state. And then actually there's one more thing, and sleep. Sleep is the number one thing. There's no amount of energy drink, coffee, vitamins, supplements, anything, but sleep is legitimately the best possible thing that you can do to give yourself balance. And going to bed, even the rigor of just having a set routine and going to sleep and then getting up at the same time, that helps a lot in creating, stability, where sometimes our lives aren't super stable. But that's sometimes one thing that you can't control. So.
Billy, I'll just say you should cut yourself some slack about not figuring out the work-life balance, because it sounds like you started your job in the Department of Health right before a global pandemic that has not happened in literally 100 years. So you might be like, okay about not having figured that one piece out yet. And I will say something that you said that really resonated with me was needing to set boundaries and not being that person that's always available and that's always going to immediately respond, right? Because people take advantage of that. And one thing that my current boss has told me, the general counsel of Meow is, don't make it easy on people to be lazy, right? Like make them do their job and hold them accountable. And it may be more difficult for you on the front end to require them to do that, but it'll pay dividends when people are told and are expected to do their own job, because that'll just make the whole process easier. And that's something that I'm working on and that I'm seeing is actually super helpful.
Those are such rich answers. Shelly, did you want to jump in too?
I was just going to say, I'm really glad Billy brought it up, and it's may say something about mothers that Brianna and I did not bring it up, but I think self-care is really important, and I'm glad that Billy talked about it. It's, sleeping and taking care of yourself and getting exercise and all of those things are incredibly important to being able to provide for our clients and provide for our family and to just be able to survive and function, especially in such a high stress career that we all have. And so I appreciate Billy bringing that up. I think it is important that we get some exercise and some sunshine and take those vacations as we go forward. And it's probably not something that is encouraged as much in our profession as it should be. But I think that self-care and taking care of ourselves, we can't help others if we're not able to function and take care of ourselves.
And Shelly, one thing you mentioned earlier is this whole perception that everybody's doing it well. And I think that's so accurate, especially in today's society where people are only posting the best of themselves on social media and making it seem like their lives are perfect. My house is a disaster right now. Our washing machine is broken. Like nobody has it figured out, like you mentioned, but everybody has this perception that what they see on social media is reality and that everybody else is doing it better than they do it. And so they're killing themselves to try to keep up instead of figuring out what makes most sense for their family. And for me, that's just like waiting until the weekend to get caught up on the dishes or whatever the case may be.
No, and on the note of pushing yourself just so hard to try to keep up with everybody else, something that I'd love to hear from you all on is something that I think young lawyers in particular encounter, and it's this balance of like, how do you participate in the legal community? Because it's you're not just yourself, and you're not just a lawyer in your job. You're working to build a reputation after you graduate law school and establish yourself. And I think that's a hard thing to do. It's something that I thought a lot about, and I also think it's difficult to do because if you want to, take on an extra role, be it a leadership role with the state bar or a leadership role with a practice section or anywhere else, it's also really important not to bite off more than you can chew, and you probably don't know how much you could chew when you first graduate law school. So I'd love to hear from you all if you have any thoughts on that. I'm gonna surprise you all here, but Billy, do you want to take that question first?
Yeah, I think you'll really never know until you get in there. I think what I try to tell young attorneys is, when I was in law school, it was sort of understood like, the best thing for you is to go to a law firm and like for Lindsay and for Shelly, like that wasn't necessarily the path that you guys were on, but it was sort of like what you were supposed to do. So that's what I did. But what I tell young attorneys is that go to what you want to be doing, like seek out what you want to be doing early, because sometimes you get pigeonholed into things you don't want to do. But certainly I think you want to learn and listen as much as possible so you don't bite off more than you can chew, ask questions. And then it's weird, but like trust your training, trust the stuff that you've learned in law school. There are times where you have to think like, did I have a class on that? And was that in Aquilino's manual, or was that in, like, how did I do that, interview in the depos class? Like, I'd actually have to do, and you'll instantly just find yourself in those scenarios, having to apply that stuff. And sometimes you're going to have to go for it and learn as much as you can. So I think it's just an eyes open, ears open kind of mentality until you can figure out like what you know and don't know. But the other side of that is like what I've learned, again, as a client of law firms and things, is that you realize that a lot of people are sort of kind of faking it, and just kind of going at things. And there's some specialization and some institutional knowledge in all things. But again, everybody kind of goes at it their own way. And you basically listen and learn until you can find your own way and understand how you're gonna handle yourself and your legal practice. So
I think for me, if I would hop in after Billy, the difficulty for me was going to a law school that wasn't UNM and wanting to establish a practice here. I know, Lindsay, you might speak to this, but my experience is that even though I grew up in New Mexico and got my undergraduate degree at UNM, there is a little bit of an insular kind of group. And I was told when I was in law school and home for the summer that if someone basically said, "Oh, you think you're too good for us, that you left to go to a different law school." And I was pretty offended by that, because I thought to myself, like, if I did think I was too good, I would have left and not come back. But I really care about investing in this community and about being here where my family is and where my roots are, and really giving back to the people who have given so much to me. And so the way I try to reflect that is in outside work, and some of that is outside legal involvement. I would say that I have had varying degrees of success with that involvement, because some periods of private practice have been so busy that I haven't been able to attend every meeting, or I haven't been able to give as much as I want. But in the past, I've been involved in the trial practice section, or the intellectual property law section, or the young lawyers division. I've helped organize CLEs. I've been speakers for CLEs. I've written legal articles. I know one thing that helps with that is, like doing it with someone, having someone who has this great idea and writing the article together, or doing the presentation together. That's been really fun. It's also easier to be involved if it's something that you're passionate about and interested in. So I'm on the board of the Catholic Foundation for the Archdiocese of Santa Fe that gives grants to, immigrants and women who are leaving abusive relationships, and to schools, and to support people who don't have enough food to eat. And giving back in that way really feels good and supportive of the community that I really want to serve.
Thanks, Brianna. Shelly.
I agree with what Brianna said. I think it is important to be involved in the legal community. I think we've talked about a couple of different things that aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. We've talked about finding your own way, but also, finding a mentor and participating in the legal community. And I think both of those things are important. And I think that it's important for the next generation of attorneys and us to be able to be involved in the legal community if we want to see changes on, that's how we've always done it, or if we want changes to reflect how we want work-life balance to be going forward, and that sort of thing. And so I think it's incredibly important to be involved in the legal community, whether that means being on a Supreme Court committee, or being a part of the local bar association if you're not in Albuquerque or Santa Fe, or those sorts of things, or being on a local board of directors. All of those things that I've done over the years have really given me relationships with other people that I've valued, and that I can call upon them when I have questions, or when I need help, or when I just need to talk to somebody about something. And so I think it is something that I would encourage young attorneys to do going forward, is be involved in the legal community, but in addition in the community at large.
That's a great answer, Shelly. And I'll say, I always think you don't need to be involved in everything. You can pick your thing that you're really passionate about, your one board, your one practice section, your one area of volunteering. And I think do that well. I think that's a great piece of advice. And in parting words, we're just about at time here, but I'd love 30 seconds or so each to hear about, what do you want to see change in this profession? What would you like to see for a healthy community of upcoming lawyers? Brianna, you want to take this one first?
Sure. So a couple of things, and I've already alluded to this, but I think it would be great for firms to just implement a standard paid leave act for their employees, whether those employees are lawyers or staff members, men or women. I also, really love right now in Meow if there's a benefit that's paid out every month, it's reimbursed for wellness. So it could be like sport, like any sports activity, any personal wellness, and they just pay you, reimburse you a certain amount a month. That would be a great way to impose kind of like a take care of yourself mentality. And I think it would be a relatively cheap benefit to offer employees who are already giving back so much.
That's great. Thanks, Brianna. Billy, what do you think?
I think it's about, for me, making sure that we promote mentorship and skill development and allowing people who work under us and who we train and our interns and externs to have their own way of doing things. And I was literally just texting an attorney in our office, and he was asking about this document. I said, as long as it has these things in it, I don't need to review it, and just allowing people to have their own voice and their own abilities, but take the time to train and mentor people and give them assignments. I was just thinking about this earlier this week. Give people assignments, give them the ability to develop and mentor them, cultivate them, and make them interested in the law, because I think the law can be tough sometimes. It can be it can be a very negative environment sometimes. But if we can promote ultimately we all have a purpose, and if you still get something out of that purpose each and every day, then that's it's a good job. So I think we should promote more of that.
Thanks, Billy. Shelly, any parting thoughts for the next gen?
I think I would say that I hope that we can learn to be more civil to one another. I hope that lawyers can continue to help other lawyers and to realize that we don't have to do it the way it was always done. We don't have to do it my way. We don't have to do it your way. We all just have to do it our own way and figure it out for ourselves. But I think if we continue to be civil with one another and help each other out, we can make the legal profession a better place for all of us.
Thank you. And what a beautiful way to send us off, Shelly. Thank you, Billy, Shelly, Brianna, for your thoughts and wisdom today. And thank you to our listeners for listening to Legal Wellbeing in Action.
Thank you for listening. This episode was produced by the State Bar of New Mexico's Wellbeing Committee and the New Mexico Judges and Lawyers Assistance Program. All editing and sound mixing was done by Blue Sky Elan. Intro music is by Gil Flores. The views of the presenters are that of their own and are not endorsed by the State Bar of New Mexico. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, or legal advice. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding